The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.
Welcome to Crime and Justice Radio, where we talk all things crime, justice, mayhem, and the courts with expert insiders and legal outcasts. Good afternoon. My name is Aida Leisenring, or rather, good evening. And I'm your host, along with co-host Bruce Barquette. Bruce, how's it going?
Okay. Little irritated tonight.
I'm scared to ask why.
I'm tired of everyone on every side of every issue thinking there's only one answer to every question, their answer. It's gotten to be irritating.
That's called Twitter.
No, it's called life and politics. From the Taliban to the Democrats to the Republicans to the anti-vaxxers to the pro-vaxxers to the media to Twitter itself and Facebook, who think if you have a discussion about something and you don't agree with them, they're going to ban you. You can't say or think something different than the other person without becoming demonic or the enemy or a health hazard. And from the vaccine mandates in the city that are now prohibiting people who, either for health reasons, religious reasons, or just a general choice, who decided not to get or haven't been vaccinated yet, can no longer participate in life in New York City. So all of that has gotten me a little irritated, which I know is not, you're not supposed to start a show off. Irritated, you're supposed to be happy and looking forward to a great show. And we do have a great show. We have Anne Donnelly, the Republican candidate for DA in Nassau County, is coming on today. Marc Howard, a brilliant professor from Georgetown who's running a fabulous clinic with Marty Tankliff, and a number of other interesting topics. But that's how I started off.
Let me just respond to your irritation.
Oh, by the way, before I do that, people want to call in 631-451-1039, 631-451-1039. And feel free to tell me your one answer to whatever question's bugging you.
So here's the deal. I'm actually blessed to have friends and family that come from diverse political, economic, and professional fields. So I don't live in an echo chamber, and that's how I stay sane. Number two, I think we can solve most of the world's problems if everyone listening and everyone not listening makes a choice for just 3 days. It's the no social media, no news, no internet challenge. If that happened, I think everyone would actually come back to sanity and realize, what the real problems in their life are, their neighbors' lives, and they'd have normal, meaningful dialogues.
It's the Red Sox Yankee phenomenon. Right? So you grow up a Yankee fan, and Roger Clemens comes to New York to pitch for the Yankees. And there were Yankee fans who were upset about that because he had been a Red Sox for so long. And that has now turned into life, politics. I don't think he'd be allowed into the Yankee Stadium this year, given how people are.
When you do sports metaphors, I just go blank.
Oh, sorry.
But listen, we were on last Monday, and a lot has happened since our last show. And leaving the tragedy of Afghanistan aside, though there is a criminal justice topic about that I might get to later, a lot has happened in crime and justice. Disgraced Suffolk County District Attorney Thomas Spota, who's 79 or 80, turning 80 this year, has been sentenced to 5 years. Our governor, Cuomo, has resigned. An American Idol finalist has had her children taken away by CPS over literally nothing, and that's going to be coming up more in the media. Justice Barrett denied a hearing at all, a lawsuit posed by Indiana University students saying that they didn't want to be vaccinated, but the school was going to force them to resign if they didn't. And by the way, not capturing a lot of media attention, hundreds of Rikers staff, nurses, doctors, corrections officers, and the union protested today at 3 the dangerous and deplorable conditions, not just for their inmates, but for them working on the job and their work shortage, staff shortage, and how dangerous an atmosphere it has become. So there is so much to talk about. I don't know if we'll get to it. I do want to take a moment, though, to chat about what might seem petty because it's American Idol.
But it's actually not petty. It's actually quite disconcerting in many ways.
And so CPS basically took 2 children away from this woman, and I call this the example of the week of the disappearing civil rights in the U.S. and the slippery slope. And we should all be concerned here. The woman's name is Saisha Mercado. She was a finalist on American Idol, and she recently had both her kids taken away from her in Manatee County, Florida, her 10-day-old baby daughter, pending a fight to get her son back after allegations of malnutrition. And what happened is her son, Amen Ra, was not taking to bottled milk. He was a year old, and she was no longer physically able to provide breast milk to him. So she took him into the hospital, and I don't have the details of what occurred, but there's an assertion by a doctor that she refused to allow her child to get a vitamin B12 shot. And as a result of this, CPS took her child away and didn't ask her, do you have other families while we're investigating this? Aunts, uncles, grandparents, just literally gave the kid to a random foster home.
A random white foster home, as I understand it.
Right. Now she's making some allegation that, this is racial discrimination. I can't believe that you wouldn't consider my family members first. But the doctor, Dr. Sally Smith, was actually the subject of a USA Today Network investigation for being accused of being too quick to conclude parents were abusing their children. I guess the investigation revealed dozens of instances where she had these charges lodged or separated parents from their children, but they were later acquitted, though their reputations were forever tarnished. So when I sent this your way...
My reaction was, what's next? If your 13-year-old isn't vaccinated, does Governor Cuomo come, or the next governor come and say...
Letitia James, or whoever that might be.
The other thing that happened today that didn't get much news is Governor Cuomo issued a mandate for all healthcare workers in hospitals and senior living centers to be vaccinated.
That's 450,000 people, or they lose their jobs.
Interestingly, 25% of them haven't been vaccinated, which means that's a choice by them. I'm not saying it's a good choice or bad choice. I'm saying they made a choice. Those are healthcare professionals that are saying, we work here, we work with COVID, we know what's going on, we have full access to the vaccine. They've thought about it and said, no thanks, I'm good here.
Well,
and the governor has said, no, you're not. You'll be vaccinated or you won't be working here. It is, again, our answer or you're out.
And by the way, it's interesting you mentioned that. You're like, for whatever reasons, recently a study came out that was conducted by the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University. And I raise this because a lot of people say, oh, those anti-vaxxers are idiot. A lot of people aren't anti-vaccinations. They're just distrustful of this particular vaccine. And they get typecast as Trump supporters or people in the South or idiots or murderers. They completely get ostracized by many individuals. But this study concluded that the most resistant to this particular vaccine are holders of PhDs. So arguably the smartest, most intelligent people.
Most well-educated.
Well-educated. I don't know. I would agree that you have to have some intelligence to make it that far. Maybe you're an idiot to go to school for that long. Who knows? So, and their numbers do not continue to drop. They stand firm. But yeah, it's pretty alarming.
Look, let's move from my irritation and the topics that rose to a slightly more pleasing topic, I hope, politics. And the race for the Nassau County District Attorney's Office, which is wide open this year, unlike it's been since probably 2005. A woman by the name of Anne Donnelly is running as the Republican candidate. Anne is a 32-year prosecutor in that very office, has participated in virtually every type of case that you can think of, and is a mother and a wife. And I can tell you, just an all-around really good person. The type of individual that you would trust with anything, would want to have a beer with, and feel fully confident in being a lawyer, and if she was representing you or participating in really anything with this woman. She's that good, that smart, and going to give the Democratic contender a real race for his money. And we're lucky enough to have Anne on the line. Anne, are you there?
I'm here, Bruce. Thank you very much.
No problem.
And I filmed that for your next commercial.
No, it's all true. It's all true. So tell us, why do you want to be the DA, and why are you better than the other guy?
Well, Bruce, you just said it all. I want to be the DA because I've been a prosecutor for 32 years. It's the only thing I've done. It's what I do, and I want to continue to do it as the head of the office. And the DA's office should never be run by a politician. You really need a prosecutor in that role who knows how the system works, who knows how the people work. And my opponent is the complete opposite. He not only authored and voted for the bail reform law, which has been a disaster, allowing hundreds and hundreds of dangerous criminals out of prison, and hundreds who get arrested not being able to be held on bail. And that's certainly not someone I would think we want to lead the prosecution office. You know, if he was running for legal aid, maybe.
You're talking to two defense attorneys, one of whom adores you, but is still a criminal defense lawyer.
Certainly you don't believe in preventative detention, right?
No, absolutely not.
And you don't believe in bail laws that would maybe unintentionally end up resulting in the discrimination of people without funding.
No, absolutely. And I think the example they use when they talk about bail reform, the young man who was held in Rikers.
Right. Yeah, that was a tragic story. For people who don't know it, he was held there for over a year and ended up killing himself.
The Staten Island.
That never should have happened. You know, I have actually I don't have a problem with, you know, misdemeanor cases, not putting bail on them. But I think what's missing is that they took away the judge's discretion.
We agree. Absolutely.
You can't look at someone's record. You can't look at their risk of flight. You can't take that into consideration. And to me, that's a problem for the judges and for the people.
But, I mean, the problem with the judge's discretion is that unintentionally, maybe it's subconscious bias, a judge may look at an individual of color who's had a spotty record and say, I'm going to set bail, and that individual won't be able to pay it, even though ultimately it's not that serious a crime or the crime is worthy of a plea negotiation. And it just seems to be that if you take a walk around Rikers, most people in that position are people of color.
I think that... Go ahead.
I was going to say that may be true, and I'll let you answer the question, obviously. But you have to strike a balance, and maybe that should have been the theme for tonight instead of my own irritation with the lack of balance. But you have to strike a balance. The judges have to have the discretion to keep or set bail on people who need it set, and not set on people who don't. And they have to exercise the discretion appropriately. That's the key. And that didn't happen. And I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I was all for bail reform. I'm all for discovery reform. But the bail reform clearly went too far. I'm still a citizen. I still have a family that I'm raising in Nassau County, and I want the place to continue to be safe. So tell us a little bit more about how you'll interact with the police, community relations with the police, given all that's happened since George Floyd.
Well, I think it's important to continue to rebuild community relations with the police. You know, they have started some great outreach programs that I support very much, and that I would continue to support, to be able to support our communities, introduce them to the police in a way that's not frightening or
confrontational.
To know what these men and women do. They're not out to hurt people. They're out to try to help and protect people.
No, they are. We had Commissioner Pat Ryder, who I know you know very well.
Who's a fantastic man.
He's a great guy. All right, great guy and great police commissioner and I think that he has the right approach to things, as sounds like you do too. What about plea bargaining, Annie? I know that I'm digging inside baseball here. Sorry, Ms. Donnelly. But tell us about the plea bargaining policies that you'd put into place.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the plea bargaining or not plea bargaining policies I would take away is this blanket rule that there'll be no plea bargaining on certain cases. Every case deserves to be looked at individually, every person's background, what was going on in their life, what may still be happening in their life. It deserves to be looked at.
Amen.
Thank you. I don't believe we should ever say, I don't care what happened. If you committed this crime, there'll be no bail. You have to look at the whole person, the whole circumstance, the whole of everything.
So how did you decide to run for DA? How did you wake up one morning and said, I've got an idea. Instead of just being a line assistant, I think I'd like to run the office.
Actually, what happened, Bruce, is, that people in the office were talking, and they'd come to my office and talk about how upset they were that the Democrats were running Todd Kaminsky, and how upset they were about my opponent and how they felt and what they felt he was going to do to the office. And I agreed with them. And then one day I woke up and I said, you know what? I was approached. They asked if I would consider running. I said, how do I say no when I have an opportunity to maybe do some good and protect the office that I've worked in for so many years and keep people safe and continue for, a law enforcement way of life?
Can I? And sorry. Continue.
No, that's why I.
No, that's the best reason to run, because you actually believe in it and you think you can make a difference. May I ask what some might have been? Obviously, don't call out names, but what were some people discussing that made them upset that Todd Kaminsky was running? What was their view of how that would affect the office?
They were discussing the fact that he's truly a politician and an opportunist. He seems to jump from job to job whenever he sees what he thinks is the next good step. And, the worst thing that can happen is for someone to come into the office to be the DA for, 4 years or 2 years and then leave to run for some other office.
You do get the feeling that he is not going to make the district attorney's office his last stop along the political train.
Correct. He's already talked about wanting to go to the be the attorney general, to be governor, so he doesn't have his eyes on the office. He doesn't have his eyes on Nassau County. I do. And they were upset about some of what they perceive as flip-flopping that he does. He comes out against bail, for bail reform, and then now when he's being called on the carpet for it or called out, he tries to back away from it. I believe if you have a position, you take a position, you stand by it.
No, and look, bail reform is important. The way it worked before was not good. It did have a lot of people in jail pre-trial unnecessarily, simply because they couldn't afford to post what was, relatively speaking, a small amount of money, right? $1,000, $1,500, $2,500, even $5,000. That should not be enough money or to keep people in jail before they've even been tried or convicted of anything.
I agree.
Talk to us a little bit about one of the things that's close to our heart, at least at our firm. We do a lot of post-judgment work with people who have been incarcerated for decades and wrongly convicted. And district attorneys' offices around the country now are implementing something, conviction integrity bureaus, people to take a second look at cases. What's your view on that?
I think that is one of the most important units you can have in your office. Because if someone steps forward and said there was a mistake made and justice wasn't served, it is our duty to look at it and see if there was a mistake made, if something happened, if this person was wrongly convicted. The conviction integrity unit, I think, is that important.
It's also, I think, important and we all fall into these pitfalls. If you do defense work for too long, or potentially prosecutorial work for too long, or if you're a corrections officer for too long, it's easy sometimes, not everyone, to cut corners. But I think potentially training of prosecutors not to be rewarded for the win, but to be rewarded for ethically, looking at a case and investigating the matter. Would you implement any kind of training for prosecutors?
Yes, I think that's a training that has to continue through all your years in the office. Because I agree with you. We have to remember as prosecutors, at the end of the day, it's not winning or losing. It's making sure that justice is served and that things are done fairly. And I've tried to do that my whole career, and I will continue to do that.
We don't make endorsements on Crime and Justice Radio, Anne, but thanks for coming on. Good luck to you. Hopefully you'll come back and chat with us again as the campaign heats up after Labor Day. We'd love to have you. Thanks very much.
It was great speaking to you, Anne. Good luck.
Good luck. We'll see you soon. We'll be back in just a few minutes with Marc Howard, who runs the
Making an Exoneree Clinic at Georgetown University.
With Marty Tankleff. We'll see you later.
Welcome back to Crime and Justice Radio. I'm Aida Leisenring, and I'm here with Bruce Barquette. And we have an incredible guest on the line right now, Marc Howard, professor of government and law at Georgetown, one of the leading advocates for criminal justice reform. He currently runs Making an Exoneree Clinic at Georgetown University, where he, along with best friend Marty Tankleff, who, if anyone doesn't know, is a famous exoneree who did 17 years for the wrongful conviction of the murder of his parents and is now a practicing defense attorney. And they together have helped secure the exoneration and release of many wrongfully convicted individuals. Marc, I didn't even get to your pedigree educationally, which involves a few masters and PhDs from Berkeley, undergrad, Yale, and, your BA at Georgetown Law.
Every elite university from east to west.
We're
Overrated.
Well, I went to Brown. That was the cool school. That was the cool Ivy.
I didn't go to any Ivy League schools. They wouldn't even let me drive through the campus.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be with you guys.
Hey,
for inviting me on.
You're doing unbelievable work with Marty Tankleff down in Washington. How many people have you guys, in the short time that you've had this program, how many people have you guys gotten released or exonerated?
We've helped get 3 people out. Valentino Dixon, who had served 27 years in New York, mainly in Attica, who's an amazing artist and drew golf courses. So some listeners might remember that story. He was actually featured by President Obama, who got a gift from Michelle Obama of an original drawing that Valentino had made. And then Eric Riddick, who served 29 and a half years in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. It was a case actually that was brought to me by Meek Mill, the rapper. So there's an interesting backstory there. And then Keith Washington, who had been sentenced to 45 years, and we helped get his sentence reduced to time served, which is 13 years. And these have just been incredibly fulfilling accomplishments. And I have to say, it wasn't just Marty and me doing this together. It was our students. We get undergraduate students at Georgetown working on wrongful conviction cases, reinvestigating them, and we've had some success. And we have more to come. We've got a number of cases that are getting close to the door, we think.
And dare I say, your undergraduate students are potentially more impressive than some law school students. When I engaged with them and I got on a Zoom for one of your classes and I spoke to a few of your students, I didn't realize they weren't in law school. And then I'm like, wait, you're 19 or you're 20? Like, what is going on? I certainly wasn't doing cool stuff like that. I was just drinking.
For people who don't know, I mean, if a lawyer is involved in a single exoneration, involved in one case.
Most lawyers will never be involved in one case.
Most lawyers will never be involved in any, but a single case where somebody was convicted and has been in prison for a number of years, and if you're involved in one case and getting that individual out, that's life-changing, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime event. How long? The program has only been around for a couple of years, and you've had 3 already with more to come.
Yeah, it's been around for 4 years, and we've got 3 people out, one from each of the years that we covered. We do 5 cases a semester, so we have some others that are, haven't made it. We had one tragically, John Moss, who'd served over 40 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and we helped get his case picked up by the National Innocence Project in New York. And before they were able to get him exonerated, he died of a heart attack, actually, on Martin Luther King Day in 2020. It was so tragic. But we all went to the funeral. The students were at the funeral. It was very powerful. And I think, to your point, Aida, about the students, they're just amazing. And honestly, in my mind, it's not actually that they're as good as law students. There's something even better. There's something just beautiful about undergraduate students because they don't see limits. They are so motivated. They're so inspired. A lot of it's being inspired by Marty, and I hope we'll get to his story a little bit too, which is really one of the craziest of all.
We definitely, we definitely will.
Just do incredible work.
I'm curious because, and Bruce has mentioned this before. As defense attorneys, we often get letters from inmates saying, "I'm innocent, please look into my case." And there's so many letters that come in, and each one that you don't get to right away, you feel like, could this be an innocent person that I ignored? How do you choose your cases?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we get now hundreds of requests from people in prison, from their family members. We now have a whole intake process because, look, we only take 5 a semester, and we teach the class 1 semester a year. So it's really 5 per year. And we literally have hundreds of cases that we choose from. And so we want to take cases that have all their materials, that are pretty far along, where we can get all the transcripts, basically where we can hit the ground running. But we also want to take cases that are challenging and are interesting. And, we basically narrow them down ourselves, and we let our students pick the cases that they're really fired up about. So we have kind of a 2-step process where we take cases we think are really promising, and then our students pick the ones they're going to work on. And we feel like that works because then they get really invested in those cases, and they treat it like it's their life mission. I mean, it's incredible. Some of them aren't even of legal drinking age, yet they're out there. They're, going in the field. They're going to crime scenes. They're talking to witnesses. They're talking to prosecutors. And they're cracking cases that have been long closed.
And am I right that on the side they're also doing short films about each subject?
Yeah.
And there was some Cannes Film Festival.
They won an award, right?
Tell us about that.
So there's 2 things. We have our students create short documentaries that are about 8 minutes each, about the person that we believe was wrongfully convicted. And that's kind of their final project. Instead of writing a paper, which, frankly, they don't want to write and we don't want to read, to be honest, they create a video, which is a lasting legacy on their part to advocate. And with those videos, we're sometimes able to get lawyers to represent them, although Marty and I are now representing some of them as well. But, it's just
Did you win an award for?
So then there was a documentary that was made about our program, and they filmed Strong Island Film, actually. So there's some Long Island roots there. The production company led by Rob Dorfman and Cindy Dorfman filmed our class in the spring 2018 semester, the one where we got Valentino Dixon exonerated, and the one also where John Moss ended up dying tragically. But they made a documentary that's now being aired at numerous film festivals, and it's won a whole bunch of awards. I think we're up to maybe like 8 different awards. It's been accepted at over a dozen film festivals. And so our hope is that there's a network out there and a buyer that will take the documentary and release it as a 3 or 4 part series, a limited series that will then air on a major streaming service.
Wow. I support it. I'd watch it.
Doing great.
It's
incredible.
Great program. So let's not skip over Marty, who you're hoping was going to be with us today, but he had a little bit of a family emergency, and he's not able to.
And for listeners, we have Professor of Government and Law at Georgetown, Marc Howard, and you grew up with Marty Tankleff, who ended up being incarcerated for 17 years for the wrongful conviction of his parents. Yeah. And now he's exonerated. He's an attorney. He's an adjunct professor assisting you with this clinic. And he tells me that he often jokes that you, Marc, went to Yale and Marty went to jail.
He loves to say that line. I always cringe a little bit.
Me too.
I clearly got the better end of that deal. But, look, I owe everything to Marty. We go back to early childhood, even before going to elementary school. We went to the same preschool, a place called Lovey Dovey.
Oh, my God. I wouldn't let my son go there.
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore, actually. But my mom found some photos and proof that that's where we once were. And then we went to elementary school, junior high school, in Port Jefferson, New York, in Suffolk County. And, when this crime happened, it was the first day of our senior year of high school, and his parents were brutally murdered. And obviously, Bruce, you represented Marty. You know the case as well as anyone, or better than anyone. But it was a horrible crime in an area that really had very little crime. And I remember being in school that day and finding out that something had happened to Marty's parents. That's what the initial rumors were. We had no inkling at all. It never even crossed anyone's mind that somehow Marty could have been involved. I had driver's ed that day, first day of driver's ed class, and the driver's ed teacher who knew Marty said, "Oh, go by the house." And I remember we drove by the house. We saw police tape. We all saw these police cars. We thought, "Oh my God, this is serious. This isn't just a little accident. Someone fell down the steps or something." And that's when we realized it was a serious crime scene. And then we heard the news that by the end of the day, Marty had been arrested, supposedly having confessed to the murder of his parents. But as we know,
stop right there, because you've known Marty your whole life. You've heard that he's just confessed to the murder of his parents. You're not, a 4-time Ivy League professor and attorney. You're literally learning how to drive. What are you thinking? Do you think there's no way, or do you think, oh, this is so weird?
Well, I definitely thought there's no way, in the sense that, Marty was scrawny at the time. He weighed 140 pounds. Both of his parents were big. So just even that idea alone. Then, I knew, very early on, and I was a budding reporter. At the time, I thought I wanted to be a journalist. And so I was the editor of our high school newspaper, which was called the Purple Parrot, which honestly, in retrospect, if they could give Pulitzer Prizes, retrospectively, like, we deserve one, because the Purple Parrot is the only newspaper in all of Long Island and all of New York and all the country that actually got the story right about Marty Tankwood, just that he was innocent.
Amazing.
So anyway, we wrote about it. I researched it. I mean, there was so much, Bruce, all this about even there was skin under his mother's fingernails. Some nails had broken off, that she was clawing his attacker. Marty didn't have a scratch on his body. There was so much that was just implausible. And then as we got to know more about his father's business partner, who, hired hitmen and committed this crime, and then potentially paid off a police detective to frame Marty. I knew pretty early on that there was a lot more to this. And I believe Marty was innocent. I wrote about it. I supported him. But then, he was convicted, and he was sentenced to 50 to life. And then, as he likes to say, I went to Yale, he went to jail. We lost touch. It was an era when, that's just what you did. When you move on, you don't really have ways to connect with people. But then, it's tough if you go to
two different colleges, let alone if one person's in a state prison system.
Exactly. Like, I didn't even know how I would go about doing it. So, I never forgot about him, though, and I would always tell people, I know someone in prison who's innocent. And this was before the Innocence Project. This is before DNA, opened the door to the reality about wrongful conviction. And so I would, tell people about Marty, but, most people either thought I was, lying or crazy or whatever. Like, how could that happen? Oh, but didn't he confess? So I would have to explain the whole story. But, usually if someone was actually open-minded and listened, they would realize, this is complete, craziness that he's still in prison.
So let me stop you, because we don't have a ton of time, and I want to. Yeah. I mean, the story of Marty's innocence, I think, is, especially for people in Suffolk County, is so well known now. Yeah. And one of the things that happened last week was the prosecutor, not who prosecuted him, but the prosecutor who fought bitterly his exoneration from 2002 to 2008. Thomas Spota, in his office, fought Marty's applications to have his conviction vacated. Ultimately, Spota's efforts were unsuccessful, and Marty was the conviction was reversed and ultimately dismissed by Andrew Cuomo, ironically, who was then the Attorney General. And Spota, right? And you were around. I remember you being there. You wrote an amicus brief. You went to the hearings. And Spota is about to begin his time in jail, if you will, 5 years in federal prison. What's your take on the I don't know, the paradox of Marty being a lawyer helping other people get out and Spota on his way to a federal prison?
I got one word. One word says it all: karma. And if I want to use a few words, karma is a B. If we're allowed to say that on air.
I don't know that that's a curse word, but you'll be bleeped anyway.
Yeah. So, first off, let me just say, Bruce, to you, I saw you in the courtroom, and you were phenomenal. And you played just such an incredible role in Marty's exoneration.
We all did. A lot of people did.
Out without you. So
he wouldn't have gotten out without a lot of people.
Others. It was a big team, but Bruce, you were extraordinary. And I saw you in action in the courtroom, and you are just a genius. And the way you think on your feet and the way you handle.
Okay, that's good enough. We're good.
He's blushing.
We're good here. But talk to us about Spota, because he was one of the things that people may not realize is the lead detective who extracted the false confession from Marty is an individual who's passed away. His name was James McCready, and McCready was in trouble himself with the State Investigation Commission for doing similar things, and was actually himself charged with an assault. And his lawyer through all that was
Tom Spota.
Exactly.
So Tom Spota represented in his capacity as defense attorney at the time, K. James McCready, and he was representing the police union and police officers accused of different violations and assaults and so on. And what Spota, he should have clearly had no role in the case because McCready was a part of it and should have fully recused himself. He sort of, as you remember, partially recused himself and erected some sort of wall that he said that, the assistant district attorney, Leonard Lado, was essentially autonomous. But we know that Spota was involved. He showed up in the courtroom one day and he was sending a message that he is very much in charge of opposing Marty's exoneration and doing everything possible. And he sent that message. And he kept Marty in prison for many, many more years.
Six more years after we brought the evidence forward. 6 more years.
Yeah.
And his lead investigator through most of that time was an individual by the name of?
His lead investigator was the guy, Warren.
No, Burke.
Chief Burke.
Chief Burke, who became who himself did 44 months in federal prison.
He did.
None of these people did anything for Marty, but yet, eventually their karma, I guess, caught up to them. But I'm interested because I think, did you publish a book called Unusually Cruel?
I did.
You've published
Unusually Cruel
4 books?
3 books and 1 edited book that I wrote.
And tell us, prison's punishment, the real American exceptionalism in 2017. I have to read that. But generally, how do you feel about how much jail time we sentence people generally to?
Yeah, let me just be blunt and cut to the chase. Our system is completely broken. Our criminal justice system is an utter and complete failure. And I don't say this as somebody who's a flag-burning, hippie, like anti-American. I say this as someone who deeply loves the country and wants it to live up to what its ideals are. And the ideals are beautiful, but the reality falls so far short. So there are so many wrongful convictions. There are so many mistakes that are made. Even for people who did commit crimes, the sentencing is so deeply punitive. The opportunities in prison to rehabilitate, to develop a second chance, to improve so that you come out and you're successful are almost non-existent. If anything, you come out worse than when you went in. There are so many problems in our system. So my book, Unusually Cruel, gets at it and compares the U.S. to a set of European countries, France, Germany, and the U.K., and shows that on every single measure, the U.S. is worse with worse results, more cruelty. And so, Marty's case was kind of the impetus for me to go in this direction. I went to law school when Marty was in prison was when I decided I was going to go to law school to get him out of prison. That was my reason for going to law school. I was already a tenured professor at Georgetown. I'd already been there for a few years. And when I started discovering the law, it opened my eyes to the fact that what happened to Marty, which I thought was just so crazy and just happened to him, is actually very common. You've got prosecutors abusing their power. You've got judges who are mainly former prosecutors who are sentencing people to insanely long time, and you've got a prison system that is completely broken.
So we only have 2 minutes left, but let me ask you this, because I often go to court and I watch how all these judges in state court, federal court, first of all, is entirely different, and the mandatory minimums and the lack of, ability to know what the client is going to get until he's actually sentenced is ridiculous. But that aside, state court judges have this flair to them. Some of them are civil and respectful. Some of them are just, too much power, and they abuse their discretion, and they treat a lot of our clients or their family members not so nicely. How do you solve the abuse of discretion by judges, the lack of mercy by prosecutors, the lengthy prison what? Now you've got a minute. In 1 minute.
Before you do that, I'll give you the full minute. I want to emphasize the point you just made. The analysis you did with the European countries is we are crueler and it doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just that we're easy on criminals, easy on crime, we're soft leftist criminal defense lawyers. The system is so broken, it doesn't get it right from any angle.
How do you change it?
That's right. Well, look, I could give you a much longer answer, but in a minute, I'll say what I'm doing is I started a nonprofit called the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice. Marty just joined our board, actually. And what we're doing in the Douglass Project is bringing people inside a prison to visit a prison and to have a sit-down conversation with a group of incarcerated residents of the prison, and to connect with them on a human level, and to realize that they are just like our own brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. And through these encounters, we're actually able to change the perception of incarceration and make people care about incarcerated people. And this is something that I believe in strongly. I've been doing it for many years with Georgetown, with my students. And that's our way to take on the problem of incarceration. And I want to bring all prosecutors and judges inside. And I have done it sometimes, and it's been very powerful, because rather than looking at the person before them in the courtroom as some kind of monster or some person who's just, hopelessly bad, they can realize that people change, people grow up, people develop,
Marc,
transform.
You're doing great work. Keep it up. And for our listeners, I know today we had a candidate running for DA, and we had Marc on, and people are going to say this is a leftist show. Next week, we have Fred Klein, a former homicide prosecutor from Nassau County, who is probably one of the best lawyers I've ever seen in the courtroom.
Marc, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, but I'm nonpartisan, baby.
See ya.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.